All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're putting on our classical scholar hats to genuinely unpack the authentic frameworks of ancient Greece. And we are moving way, way beyond those simple pop culture adaptations of these myths. We aren't just looking at fun campfire stories here. We're looking at how an entire civilization organized its very reality. I am absolutely thrilled to guide you through this journey today, mapping out exactly how the ancient Greeks understood their universe, their gods, and their own civic duties.
So, here's our roadmap. 1. Origins of the cosmos. 2. The Olympian pantheon. 3. The heroic age. 4. Rituals of the polis. And finally, 5. The underworld and afterlife. Basically, we're going to structure this exploration as a massive, top-down descent through the Greek worldview. We'll start at the absolute macro level of creation and work our way all the way down, deep into the afterlife.
Okay, let's kick things off with Section 1, Origins of the Cosmos, Creating the World with Words. It's absolutely crucial that we frame Hesiod's famous epic, the Theogony, not as some fairy tale, but as a cosmos epion. That means a universe constructed entirely of words. Hesiod isn't just telling us who gave birth to whom. He's literally defining the fundamental building blocks of existence itself.
Now, what's really interesting here is how the Greeks defined chaos. When we use the word chaos today, we usually think of a messy room or absolute disorder, right? But for Hesiod, chaos was not a jumble of undifferentiated matter. It was a true, absolute void. It was the total negation of features. It was completely empty. And it only gained meaning once its exact opposite came into existence: the solid, the locable, the broad-breasted Gaia, or Earth. So the Greek cosmos moves from the totally undefined to the strictly defined.
Let's trace these incredibly brutal transitions of cosmic power. The creation of the universe was essentially a cosmic struggle to halt the destabilizing force of endless procreation. The female generative principle, Earth, wants to constantly give birth and promote change. But the supreme male gods, they want to stop it to maintain stability. So, Uranus tries to stop change by physically repressing his children, keeping them trapped inside Gaia. Then Cronus comes along and tries a different tactic, ingesting his children the moment they're born. Both of these rulers are violently overthrown. Finally, Zeus steps in and breaks the cycle, not just through violence, but by assimilating guile.
And this dynamic brilliantly illustrates the twin forces of cosmic change: Ba, which is brute violence, and metis, which is cunning or guile. While Uranus and Cronus relied heavily on pure brute violence, Zeus ultimately triumphs because he utilizes metis. In fact, he preemptively swallows his first wife, whose very name was Metis, guile personified, while she's pregnant. By permanently absorbing female guile directly into himself, Zeus secures his eternal supremacy. He literally takes the engine of generational change and makes it his own.
All right, moving down from the cosmos to the mountaintops, we hit Section 2, the Olympian pantheon, dividing the world. Now that Zeus has established this cosmic stability, well, that stability requires a strict political division of reality. The universe simply must be partitioned.
You really have to think of the natural divisions of the universe as an explicit political agreement. It's like a treaty. Zeus is allotted the sky, Poseidon takes the sea, and Hades is handed the world of the dead. But the earth itself? That remained a shared, carefully negotiated domain among all three of them. This negotiated political agreement among the gods actually became the ultimate model for human behavior and human communities.
So the absolutely crucial takeaway here is that the gods weren't just characters in a storybook. Their power was literally mapped onto the physical and agricultural landscape of Greece. Zeus rules the mountaintops because he controls the weather and the rain. Demeter is specifically the divinity of cultivated planted crops. Artemis haunts those furthest territorial boundaries, while Pan represents the raw, animal energy of the uncultivated wild areas. When an ancient Greek citizen walked out of their city and into the wilderness, they were walking through a strictly zoned divine hierarchy.
Now let's look at Dionysus to see how complex this gets. Dionysus is the god of the vine and woody plants, and he perfectly represents the complex, boundary-breaking nature of Greek deities. He resides in transitional spaces, usually between the plains and the mountains. And he embodies a profound paradox, He's the god of wild, blessed deliverance, but also of absolute terror and madness. He violates boundaries, straddles borders, and challenges the binary entirely. He's a local god, yet he's always depicted as a foreigner.
Dropping down from the divine domains completely onto the earth, we enter Section 3, the heroic age, mortals and monsters. This was an era of mighty figures, rooted all the way back in the Bronze Age. an age of oral traditions that later formed the epic literature we all know so well today.
But here's where we need to make a massive myth versus reality pivot. How the Greeks read about heroes is vastly different from how they actually worshiped them in practice. Heroes in epic myth were those grand Bronze Age warriors, the monster slayers, guys like Achilles, Theseus, and Heracles. But heroes in cult, the day-to-day religious practice, were essentially just dead mortals. They were dead men venerated at local tombs because their unusual lives, or their unusual deaths, gave them the power to act as grounded, localized civic protectors.
And get this, they weren't exactly friendly. Surprisingly, if these localized dead heroes were ignored or left unappeased by the citizens, they could turn incredibly malicious. There's a fragment from a play by Aristophanes that features a chorus of heroes describing themselves not as glorious warriors, but as senders of lice, fever, and boils to terrorize the living. In fact, there was an ancient Pythagorean saying that advised people not to eat food that had fallen on the floor because it, quote, belongs to the heroes.
Which brings us right into Section 4, Rituals of the Polis, Myth in Daily Life. Let's explore how these divine and heroic myths validated the very existence of the polis, or city-state, through daily, structured action. For the Greeks, religion was not a deeply internal, private belief system. It was a public civic duty. Just consider the absolutely astonishing oath of the ephebes, the young Athenian citizen soldiers. Look at what they invoke. Sure, they swore to defend their weapons and their comrades, but then they called upon a massive list of local deities as witnesses: Agloros, Hestia, Eris, and they concluded their oath by swearing to protect the physical boundaries of their fatherland. They specifically list the wheat, the barley, the vines, the olives, and the figs. This civic ritual ties the divine directly to the agricultural survival of the city. Because religion was such a highly structured action, even warfare was completely subordinated to ritual. A general couldn't just casually order an attack. First, they had to consult a professional seer. Then, they had to slaughter a young female goat specifically to Artemis Agroterra, Artemis of the wilds. They would physically examine the internal organs of the sacrifice. Only if the omens were absolutely correct could they decide on the time and place for their violent military maneuvers.
What's genuinely mind-blowing is that we can trace these deeply localized civic rituals all the way back to the Mycenaean Bronze Age. Archaeologists have found these linear B tablets that reveal much darker, localized origins for the gods we know today. For example, Imaha, an early form of Hermes, literally translates to a heap of stones, acting as a pastoral god demarcating agricultural boundaries. And Juanoso, an early Dionysus, is shown not just as a god of parties, but as a chthonic escort leading humans down into the underworld. And speaking of chthonic escorts, that brings us to our final stop, Section 5, the Underworld and Afterlife, the Final Journey. We have descended from the cosmos to the mountains, down to the earth, and now we plunge below the earth to examine the Greek conceptualization of the afterlife. You see, the underworld was a rigorously geographically structured place. It was an incredibly vast, shadowy realm ruled by the god Hades, and it was divided into distinct regions based entirely on the life a person had led. Virtuous and heroic souls might find a desirable paradise in the Elysian fields, while others just wandered the shadowy wastes. This strict geography demanded very precise funerary rites from the living. Those rituals were essential to guide the deceased to their designated realm and, crucially, to protect the living from the wrath of unsatisfied, wandering spirits. But here's the thing. Even in death, Greek mythology evolved. Over centuries, as Greek culture expanded and interacted with other cultures, we see incredible syncretism, the blending of belief systems. Hellenistic art from places like Egypt shows statues of the Greek god Hades wearing the flowerpot hat of the Egyptian god Serapis. His wife, Persephone, is depicted holding a rattle associated with the Egyptian goddess Isis. The ancient Greek framework was incredibly adaptable, mapping new cultural realities seamlessly onto their oldest, deepest underworld myths. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a provocative thought. We've seen how the Greeks structured their reality, from suppressing the chaos of endless creation to literally dividing the physical landscape among their gods, right down to swearing military oaths on their local barley and figs. As you look at our modern institutions, our own political boundaries, and our civic rituals today, where do you still see the ancient tensions of cosmic order and civic duty playing out in our world? Thank you so much for exploring the Greek cosmos with me.